Hi, this is Regina Favors with Favors Financial Recovery. So the series topic today is attachment and overcoming financial setback. And so attachment is something that I talk about a lot and discuss through different audio lectures, different series, because I don't think we really have a very good understanding about secure attachment and insecure attachment and how we engage the world based upon our engagement within the family dynamic. And attachment is really specific to the initial family dynamic. How you participate, how you contribute, how you interpret life, how you engage in any form or fashion is predicated on what you learned from your parents, what you learned within the immediate family home environment, the dynamic between your parents, whether they managed their finances well, the dynamic between you and your parents, whether they doled out an allowance and required you to manage that allowance for the week and didn't have to come back and ask for more money. How you dealt with your siblings when it came to money. Did you put conditions on the money that they gave you, that you gave them? Did you threaten? Did you bully? Did you extort, right? And then the money that you manage outside of the home in the immediate secondary environment, which is the school, K through 12, she told you that this money is for your lunch money. Don't spend it. But then by the time you get to school, you have spent that lunch money. And then you're sitting there without any food to eat. And so how we deal with money as adults, I believe, has a lot to do with how we dealt with money, or how we were exposed to money, or how we listened to people talk about money, and how we have become either securely attached or insecurely attached to money based upon our relationships within that immediate family dynamic. So this is Favors Financial Recovery series topic, attachment and overcoming financial setback. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you are interested in further videos, hit the notification bell. Thank you very much for visiting the channel. This discussion is subject to fair use. Here are your learning objectives. So by the end of this lecture, students will be able to do the following: define anxious attachment, outline the 3 types of attachments, apply either attachment to your current financial setback, design a plan that considers attachment in your financial recovery. The most important thing, I think, if you can understand what anxious attachment is, it'll help you to understand secure attachment. But of course, if you can understand what secure attachment really means, you can understand anxious. So we will get into that. Then the 3 types of attachments, of course. But it's interesting that you should think about how you should apply anxious attachment or insecure attachment. Insecure attachment and secure attachment to your current financial setback, because there's something implicit in the idea that there are some attachment issues if you are in a current financial setback. You don't necessarily have to have attachment issues to an individual person. You could have attachment issues to shopping. You could have attachment issues to going to the casino or something like that, right? You continue to gamble, but it's like, burning money in your pocket. But we mostly have attachments to people. And so if you are in a current financial setback, look at the people around you and look at and really determine which one of those people continue to ask you for money, and which one of those people who you continue to give money to when you don't really have it to give. So thinking about attachment and applying it to your current financial setback, I think is very useful, because if you can recognize the problem, you can solve the problem, or you can begin thinking about how you want to solve the problem. then of course you need to design a plan that considers attachment in your financial recovery. Because if you are still having attachment issues with this individual person who keeps asking you for money and you don't resolve that situation, remember, you got to get old. If you are always saving that person by paying their rent, you're going to have problems later. You're not going to have the money to pay your own rent. And people think just because they have paid into a pension or a retirement plan, well, I can just live off that. But you still have the habit of giving that person money all the time, to the point that you will give them money during your working years, and then you will give them money during your years when you are not working, when you need that money the most. If you have $250,000 in the bank, but you don't have a job and you don't plan on getting a job, and you're just going to live off the rest of your money and live frugally, you really don't have the money to give because you don't have other income coming in. I understand that it's $250,000, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have $100,000 to give somebody, because you have to get old. You're going to get to your 60s and 70s and 80s where it's really going to matter, because your working years will be over. You can't work 8-hour shifts. You can work a 4, you can work a 2, but you're not going to be able to work 8 hours on your feet all day like you would as a 20-year-old or 30-year-old or 40-year-old. So these are your learning objectives. I want you to really think about them when you are thinking about insecure attachment, which is really anxious attachment, as we go through this lecture. All right, the mission statement. The mission of Favors Financial Recovery is to offer psychology concepts and approaches to educate and encourage individuals to overcome financial setback. This is very important because a lot of times we don't understand that that we can still be in a state of survivor's mode. But I want you to understand also that surviving is still just another type of setback. And that if you are using credit cards to just merely survive, you are basically still in setback, even if you have a job to pay them. Because you should still have a relationship with your money, with your actual dollars, right? And that credit cards should be just to build and sustain good credit, maybe making purchases, etc. So you want to get to a point where you can cross that finish line from financial setback. And I think using psychology concepts and approaches will help you to do that. The core values. So the core values for Favors Financial Recovery are personal responsibility, growth mindset, mastery orientation, ethical dealings, integrity, recovery. Personal responsibility has a lot to do with being 100% responsible for yourself. Whatever you did up until high school graduation is not your responsibility in terms of you were parented by an adult. Sure, there are consequences to actions and decisions that you make, and you have to take responsibility. But when I push this ideal of personal responsibility and 100% personal responsibility, I'm thinking about when you become an adult and you make adult-based decisions. Growth mindset is specific to Carol Dweck in her discussion of the differences between fixed mindset and growth mindset. So fixed mindset is you don't embrace challenges, you plateau early, you want to look smart in every situation. Growth mindset, you embrace challenges, you understand that failure is just, it's not the end goal. It may be part of the process. And so there's a difference between fixed mindset and growth mindset. And when you are engaging in personal finance, you want to adopt a growth mindset, which is basically connected to extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. That extrinsic, you want to look good, but intrinsic motivation in terms of academic learning, you want to learn for learn's sake, right? Mastery orientation has a lot to do with the differences between learning goal orientation and performance goal orientation, which also further has to do with fixed mindset, growth mindset, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So with learning goal orientation, you believe your abilities can be developed over time, and you learn for learning's sake in the same way as intrinsic motivation. With the performance goal orientation, you want to look smart in every situation. You don't think abilities can be developed, and you think they are fixed. That's why you oftentimes hear a student say, I'm an A student. But how is that A really being interpreted, right? Because then if you say you are an A student, you're not willing to learn anything else. Ethical dealings has a lot to do with your decision making with credit cards. And so a lot of times we make these types of decisions about credit cards based upon our current situation. We get as many credit cards because we have a job and we can pay them. But then when we have downtimes, we assume that, well, the credit card companies are just going to have to understand that I'm doing a downtime. No, they don't. Credit card companies made deals and offer payment plans for people during this pandemic, including myself. But you're still required to pay the credit card company, period. And so therefore, if you don't have, it's not, when you are up, I think that's the best time to not get many credit cards, honestly, so that you only manage whatever number you want to manage. And so if you do hit a life setback like we have, then you won't have problems trying to pay those credit cards. Integrity always speaks to character. Okay, how you conduct yourself personally, professionally, academically, financially. So that is important, that you have good integrity. And then recovery is the goal. Financial recovery is the goal. And so this is the goal you want to have in order to cross over the finish line of overcoming financial setbacks. So these are the core values for favors financial recovery. So this is anxious attachment, secure attachment, anxious ambivalent insecure attachment, and then anxious avoidant insecure attachment. So before we do that, let's get into sort of like the person who began this idea of attachment theory, and then also connected to another individual who defined anxious attachment under 3 dimensions. So John Bowlby outlines the caregiver-child relationship, which is reflected in the feeling a child experiences when separated from their parent or caregiver, and the corresponding ambivalence towards that parent. When a young child finds himself with strangers and without his familiar parent figures, not only is he intensely distressed at the time, but his subsequent relationship with his parents is not impaired, at least temporarily. The separation affects their capacity to make and maintain affectional bonds. Bowlby is synonymous with attachment theory. However, it is Mary Ainsworth who defined anxious attachment under 3 dimensions. So let's just stay with John Bowlby just for a minute. So when a child is separated from the caregiver-child relationship, on a very basic level, very introductory basic level, and all of us have experienced this in some form or fashion, when the mother or father had to take the young child to the nursery or to kindergarten, and how the child reacted, initially crying, dropping down on the floor, inconsolable. It took a few days to get that child to calm down, right? Even I was a latchkey kid, so I was the oldest child, and so I had to take my younger brother also. He was a baby brother also to the nursery after my mother did, and he was still crying. So he cried when it came to my mother, which was obvious, and we did that I think a couple of times, and then she let me do it because she had to go to work, and I took care of my younger brothers and took my other brother to school with me. But then when I left him, he did that as well. And so they are experiencing, distress in that initial moment. It's not completely impaired because the child returns to his caregiver, and mom and dad hug the baby, hug the child, right? But it does affect the capacity to maintain affectional bonds on some level. That, you know, I kind of agree with stay at home mothers during those initial years. There needs to be a parent at the house with the baby. The baby shouldn't go out. Now, that's not always the case for every mother, especially single mothers. But if the child could have the first 5 years in the home environment with one parent at least while the other parent is working, I think that helps to create and maintain affectional bonding. Eventually, though, the child is going to suffer some sort of distress. Even kids who leave the house, graduate from high school and leave the house to go to college, have suffered some kind of initial distress. Now, give it a couple of weeks and everything, and they're glad to be away from the house. But they know they can always go back to their mother's and father's parents' houses, right? Think about finances. If we look at it on a finance level, I think there's a little bit of distress when a parent gives a child $5. I understand that the parent is trying to teach the child how to manage money, but that's still $5 taken out of their immediate budget. I think we are always distressed on some level, even very intentional, obvious, innocent, sincere context. I think we can all be distressed when we have to let go of money, right? But we know in the case of the parents that if I give the child $5 and he manages $5 throughout the week, I'm going to feel validated in that decision to give the child $5, and then that's going to be proof for me that I can trust him with $5 that he'll do well the next week, right? So this is what John Bowlby studied in terms of the caregiver-child relationship. You can always research his work further to gain more insight. So let's talk about Mary Ainsworth. Mary Ainsworth noticed that babies began to move away from their mothers to explore their surroundings once they were able to crawl and walk. Ainsworth hypothesized that babies use their mothers as a secure base as a means of departing and returning to their mothers after explorations of the world surrounding them. The base was considered secure base. The babies knew they could return to their mothers if they should become anxious. So this on a very, think about the baby that's in the house with you right now, or the baby that you had to keep when you were younger. They always wiggled out of your lap and then they kind of crawled away. And then pay attention to when they will crawl away and stop and turn their head to look at you, right? Just to see if it was safe, just to see if you were there, was still there. And if you decided to move and hide, they always began to cry, right? They'll look around a little longer, and then when they can't find you, they'll cry some more. So this is what she noticed with babies, and she's going to get into the strange situation that I'm going to talk about after this slide. But I thought about that secure base, and I think about that concept secure base all the time. I think about it in terms of marriage as a secure base, why people decide they want to cheat, that the marriage gives them a secure base, that so they can go out, step out of their marriage, step out of the bed, do what they do, commit infidelity, cheating, or whatever, and then turn around and come back because they know that wife will take them back. It's a secure base. They feel it's home for them. They go out and be reckless and make all types of crazy decision making, and are oblivious to the fact that craziness could turn around and come back and affect the home. But all they care about in that moment is that they can return to their secure base. Think about it in terms of finances, and out of all the siblings, you always have one child who always needs some money. And no matter how many times you try to teach the child how to manage money, they don't care. They understand that you are a secure base. You are a financial secure base. meaning that you are stable in your life financially to the point that they know they can always depend upon you. You are secure base. You can be an emotional secure base. You can be a financial secure base. You can be a spiritual secure base. You can be any type of secure base, a knowledge, wisdom field secure base. But they know they can come back and lean on you. So that means they are not leaning on themselves. So that's something I want you to think about, that secure base, because it's something that I want to further think about and research and maybe create more audio lectures on. So Ainsworth also noticed that anxious babies seem to be the offspring of anxious mothers. She noticed that mothers separated from their husbands or families experienced more stress and seemed to pass it on to their infants. Ainsworth developed 3 types of attachment behaviors, and the following question guided the research: why are mothers so full of ambivalence? And so, you have people, mothers in particular, who come from a very big family, and where in some cases they all lived in one house. And in a strange way, there's this expectation that whoever marries is going to come and live in that house too. But then you would have a husband who decides, no, we're going to buy our own house, and so I'm going to go look for a house and you're going to come move in, right? And we're going to be married and have our own family. For that person, for that mother, it's anxiety ridden, because the mother is so used to the secure base that she doesn't, the wife is so used to the secure base that she doesn't really know how to navigate from it. As much as she has crawled away from it in terms of going to school, walked away from it in terms of meeting with friends, walked away in terms of dating, she doesn't know how to leave it to go and be an adult, an independent adult. She graduated from high school or graduated from college into a marriage, and she's likely never had to have her own place and pay bills and do everything that 100% responsible adults should do. So that's why she would pass anxiety to the families. I remember my mother telling me one time before that I used to sleep so soundly as a baby that she was afraid that I was dead, and so she would wake me up on purpose just to see if I was still alive. Well, to this day I really don't sleep well. I don't really sleep all the way through. I have to be really, really, really tired for me to sleep all the way through. I try not to take any sleeping medication because I don't want to get hooked on anything. But ever since she told me that, I couldn't understand why I was having problems. But then somehow it slipped out. And it made all the sense in the world. Well, she was a single parent at the time. She was married, and then she got a divorce or something like that. And no, if it was with my father, he was abusive. So there was already anxiety in the home. So that made her relationship with me very strained because of the abusive nature of my father. And we didn't really have a great relationship. I do remember some times where there was something between us, my mother and I, but then later it just got more and more hostile and more estranged. And now to this day, we are actually estranged. And so as adults, so I can understand how mothers can pass down that type of anxiety. That question, that research question, really threw me. Why are mothers so full of ambivalence? It's going to be answered, but I thought to myself, based upon the initial setup, that it would be the kids, the child, that would be ambivalent. But if you look at what Ainsworth is discussing, it's the mother who passes down, anxious mothers pass down anxiety and stress to the child. So this is Ainsworth's strange situation experiment. The types of attachment are based upon the research conclusions that followed regarding the strange situation in which the responsive babies were observed. So the baby had access to engaging toys, the mother was nearby. A stranger entered the room and the baby's response was noted. The mother left the room with the baby and the stranger, so their separation. The baby's response was noted. Then the baby's response was noted when the mother returned to the room, so there's reunion. Those responses were also noted. Ainsworth concluded that the baby exhibited 3 types of attachment. Now think about this in terms of money as well. You know, the baby had access to money and the mother was nearby. A stranger entered the room and the baby's response was noted. So maybe one person gave the baby some money and another person came in without money or gave money to. The mother left the room with the baby and the stranger. So the stranger doesn't give money out, right? So the child understands that money comes from the mother or the father in this situation. A stranger coming in could be an aunt, and that stranger doesn't give the baby any money, right? Then the baby's response was noted when the mother returned to the room. So there's the expectation of money from the mother because the mother is returning to the room. And then Ainsworth concluded that the baby exhibited 3 types of attachment. So let's look at them. So a secure attachment, anxious-ambivalent insecure attachment, anxious-avoidant insecure attachment. So secure attachment, a securely attached child is one who exhibits the following attachment behaviors. So the child will explore environments with enthusiasm, checks back with the secure base, mother, father, or primary caregiver, engages with strangers when mother is nearby, cries when mother leaves the room, and happily reunites when mother returns, develops a sense of security that allows the child to cope with problems and adapt well to unfamiliar situations. Parents are responsive to securely attached infants and sensitive to infants' needs. Securely attached child is comfortable and confident. So this is the child that believes he or she can depend on that initial mother, father, or primary caregiver. Anything that comes in between that processing will affect how that child views the mother, father, or primary caregiver. So sometimes you see when there's an only child for like 5 years and then the parents decide to have another child, the first child, the older child, is jealous of the new child, right? The new baby, and they do all types of things to the new baby. But then when it gets to a point where it's time to give the new child some money too, you can feel or you can see the older child feeling weird about that. Why you got to give him some money too? Because the older child has been receiving money, $5 or $1 or something like that to buy some ice cream or anything like that. They've been receiving money from their mother, father, or primary caregiver for so many years prior to the new baby coming, right? The new baby is now the 5-year-old and the older child is now the 10-year-old, right? And so now the 10-year-old has a problem with the 5-year-old receiving $5 or $1 or something like that, right? The 10-year-old may be receiving $10. And the 5-year-old might be receiving the same $5 that the older child received, right, when he was 5. So you see that happening. So when the new child could be the stranger, and so then if the stranger, when the parent gives the stranger or the new child money, it's going to affect how the previous child perceived the parent as a secure base. However, in some ways, I think parents could give each child the same $1 and the oldest child would still have a problem with it, because the first child had all that time with the initial parents by himself or by herself, that it was a secure base that he or she could always depend upon. And so when you bring in something new or somebody new, even if there wasn't a new child, and the parent said, we're not going to give you $5 anymore per week, we're just going to give you $3, that's kind of like a strange situation too, because now I've been dependent upon this secure base of $5 per week, and now you're taking away $2, right? So the parents are responsive to securely attached infants and sensitive to infants' needs. So if the child voices a concern about the change from 5 to 3, and the parents reason maybe we need to keep him on a stable route, and the child kind of disagrees, and then the parents say we need to keep the child on the stable route because we're teaching him about personal finances, then the parent might decide, okay, we're going to keep you at 5, but we're not going to go more than that right now. That's responding, being responsive, right? Being sensitive. On a very basic level, if the child cries in the crib, if the infant cries in the crib and the mother comes and picks up the infant, the mother is responding to the infant's needs. So anxious and ambivalent or insecure attachment. An anxious ambivalent child is insecurely attached. The child exhibits the following attachment behaviors: expresses distress when strangers are nearby and when they are in unfamiliar settings, whether the parent or caregiver is nearby or not. Exhibits extreme anxiety and distress when the parent departs and resists reuniting when the parent returns. Parent responds to child on his or her own schedule, rather than on the schedule of the infant. So this could be interpreted as say, for instance, the parents of the child had to switch who would stay at the home and who would not, who would go out to work. And if one of the parents was the primary caregiver for 5 years, taking care of the child in the home, and then that parent decided, okay, I want to return to work, then there's going to produce some distress, because then the father is really now the stranger. The father was the one who was going out and working and coming home, and the baby or the child knew or had a sense of when the father would come home. Well, the roles are switched. So then the father now has to begin creating and maintaining an affectional bond with the child while he's now a stay-at-home dad. He becomes the new stranger. And so then the child would cry because mom is leaving, right? Mom is leaving out the door. And so then now the child has to kind of sort of adjust. The child has to adjust. So now he's going to be looking for mom coming home, right? If you grow up in a background that is not economically manageable, maybe the background is poor or something like that, you're going to always have parents who respond to a child on his or her own schedule rather than on the schedule of the infant. And in this case, to a child. So like I said, I was a latchkey kid. I had to gather my little brother from school, and then we had to go to the nursery to go get the baby, which I believe was a toddler at that time, and go into the house and lock the door behind us. And don't open the door anymore. Of course, we opened the door, but I had to do that. And so when you have a single parent, that parent doesn't have the time to respond to the child or children on the schedule of the child. The parent has to work. So needs that you have as a child cannot be met when you need them. You have to wait. You have to wait until that parent becomes available, whether emotionally, physically, psychologically, spiritually, whether that parent becomes available. And so then when you add money to the context, you'll see this a lot, that you have a parent with 3 kids, or let's just say 2 kids. One, the parent always gives money to, responds to the needs of that child who's now an adult. So that child feels secure with that parent. But then you will have another child, the parent only responds to that child based upon the parent's schedule and not necessarily the child, who is now an adult as well. And that person would be insecure. That person would have an insecure attachment with that parent. And it happens all the time, because a lot of times parents think that the good girl or the good boy can handle himself or herself, and they don't really need the parents. But those are the people who actually need the parents probably more than the one who keeps asking for money but has no purpose, right? Doesn't look like he's going to have any purpose, or she doesn't have any purpose, and just wants the money. They don't want instruction. They don't want you to direct them. They don't want you to tell them what to do with the money. They just want the money. So you can have a parent who responds securely or insecurely to 2 different kids, and adding money to the mix reveals too, sort of like which one has an insecure attachment, which one has a secure attachment. So anxious-avoidant, insecure. An anxious-avoidant child is insecurely attached. The child exhibits the following attachment behaviors: shows little behavior indicating interest in the adults in the room, regardless of the type of adult. Avoids or ignores parents and primary caregivers, whether they are strangers or not. Strangers are not treated any differently than mothers or primary caregivers. Shows little emotional response, lacks affect or mood. They don't seem to believe that adults in their lives will respond to their signals of distress. These children come to believe that communication of their needs makes no difference at all. And this is me, and I noted this in other audio lectures. This is what sort of made me a loner. I believe I was socially nurtured to be a loner, right? And because I was isolated and rejected. And so to this day, I don't believe that people will respond to my signals of distress, because you always have somebody always competing with you. That's why you always have the pouters. You always have the people who are loud, who want everyone to give attention to them. Whereas you have this quiet person over there in the corner no one is paying attention to, and that person is thinking about suicide. That person is thinking about doing drugs. That person is thinking about running away. And it has a lot to do with the family environment, why one child would feel secure, another child would feel insecure, and another child would just be avoidant altogether. Don't feel like their needs are met at all, right? So then when you're thinking about putting money on a problem because you think it will solve a problem, I think it's really a good idea to ask questions about the person who wants money from you. Because if it's a person who feels secure, who felt secure with their parent, they're looking to feel secure with you. So they're looking to feel like they can depend upon you. They're just going to move from caregiver to another caregiver. If it's a ambivalent person, they're going to do what they need to do to try to get as much as they need to get out of you as well. But the avoidant person, a lot of times, is a person who won't ask you for anything. If you got a bunch of people in a room and everybody else got their hands out, watch the person who doesn't have his or her hand out. That's usually the person who needs the money more than all the other people. But that person won't sort of raise their hand and say, I'm in distress, maybe out of ego, maybe out of pride, maybe out of fear, but definitely out of this idea that their needs are, that no one will respond to their signals of distress. So when you're putting your money on something, you want to be careful about who you are putting your money on, because you can throw all your money to the secure attachment person or the other insecure attachment, which is ambivalent person, and miss the real person who needs money. I've heard people say that I only help those who help themselves. Well, if that person can help themselves, why are you helping them? The person who can't help themselves, the people who can help themselves are the people you should be helping. That's why money circulates only among the rich. It doesn't trickle down, as Reagan suggested. It doesn't trickle down to the lower masses. It doesn't trickle down to the people who actually need the money. That's why $25,000 plates are paid to attend, these galas and sponsors type stuff, organizations or whatever. All it does is circulate among the rich. And so then the people who are homeless out here on the streets, sure, it is a fault of their own. And in some cases, there may be an exception to the rule because we are in a pandemic, but they are still in distress. They're still in distress. Right now, as of this discussion, the people from Haiti are at the border, at the Texas border, but the U.S. government is trying to send them back to Haiti, whereas they flew out all those people from Afghanistan, and they don't have to go back right now. And so the people they're both two types of people in distress, two types of countries, two types of nations, two types of ethnicities, two types of nationalities in distress. But the government is the U.S. government is only interested in doling out a secure base, not only shelter-wise, but financially, government protections. They are only interested in doling out a secure base, setting up a secure base, and they are actually at bases. They are actually at Army, military bases, but they're only interested in doling out a secure base and supporting it financially to one group of people, whereas another group of people, they're doling out all of their financial resources to sending them back to their, to their distress, right? So then you would say that the people at the border, both Haiti and Mexican nationals, are anxious-avoidant because they know that they're not going to get a response to their signals of distress. Even though they decided to cross over and hope and pray for the best, they know they have history behind them where they know their signals of distress will not be responded to. Whereas there was an expectation from the Afghan people that their signals of distress would be responded to. And that all goes to finances because it's the taxpayer, the U.S. taxpayer, who's going to have to foot the bill, as always. So overcoming financial setback, what should you do? Reassess your childhood experiences with your primary caregiver. Evaluate your childhood experiences with money and allowances. Consider the impact the first time you were exposed to the responsibility of money. Determine if your relationship with money and personal finances reflects a secure attachment or an insecure attachment. So I remember working prior to high school. There was some little thing that my mother's friend got me a job with her daughter, and it was like coat check for a symphony or orchestra or something like that. And I think that was my first real job. And it was way before 15, 16 years old. And I remember getting some money from that, but I don't remember managing money I can't even visualize the money in my hand. I had no sense or understanding of money. I did connect money to work and work to money and labor and everything. I did do that. But if you told me about that, what I made or something, I couldn't tell you, right? But when I did get to high school, my junior and senior year, I was in a co-op program, and you went to school half a day, and then you went to work half a day. And so I worked for Hunt Oil Company in Dallas. Now I remember that paycheck. It was $4.50 an hour. And during the school year, I worked half hours, 4 hours a day. And when school was out, I worked 8 hours a day. And I definitely connected work to that, to money. And it was hard work and not hard work at the same time. It was in the accounting records room. And I remember receiving a paycheck and cashing that paycheck and everything. So I thought I was a little grown then, whatever. And then I had to there was an expectation in the house that I had to give my mother a certain percentage. Not percentage, but some kind of money towards whatever. And what she was doing was she was teaching me the idea that wherever you go, you will always have to pay something. And to this day, I still don't have a problem with that strategy. I still don't have a problem with that. She didn't take a whole lot of money or anything like that. I still don't have a problem with that. I feel like that was a very important lesson to learn. But then she made a comment, and there's something I do have a problem with, that she made a comment that what I did with my money, I was spending it on clothes. When we would have a lunch breaks used to be an hour. And so on our lunch break, we would go down, my friends and I would go down to this little boutique shop or whatever and buy some clothes. Because I couldn't buy my own clothes when I was younger. And so to be able to buy my own clothes was very important. And so I would buy clothes. But so my mother made an interesting point that I will say I did not respect as wisdom and instruction at the time, and then I caught the consequences of that years later. She said, if you don't save any money, all you're going to do is have a closet full of clothes and no savings. And I kind of looked down on that instruction. I can say that now as 46-year-old person, but that decision to not obey that instruction, that inherent instruction, because she didn't instruct me, she just gave me a statement, and that's the problem that I have. That the statement was a very important statement to make, but she didn't sit down with me and work with me in terms of helping me to understand finances. This is my first time having a job, full-time job when school was out, and half-time hours when school was in, and money is running through my hands, but I'm not getting instruction with it. Making a statement and sitting down and talking to the person about finances are two different things. And that's the problem that I had with her, because then she would make that statement and then ask for money. She would make that statement and then just sort of let me continue to spend money. It's almost like she didn't want me to have the money. However, at the same time, I'm still responsible for myself, right? And I do understand now just how important that statement was. And so then you want to reassess childhood experiences with your primary caregiver, because then she would make that statement, not sit me down to talk. I would give her money, which I still didn't have a problem with, because it was her teaching me how to understand that whenever you live with somebody, you got to pay something. She was trying to get me into that mindset. But then on top of that, she would ask for money. So she would have a statement like, if you don't save any money, you're just gonna have a closet full of clothes. But then turn around and take money on top of the other money without direction, without understanding, without helping me understand what's really going on. So then that relationship, where she asked over and above what I was already giving her, continued. It continued into my adulthood in terms of adulthood, and then it continued into my college years, to the point that I said to myself, I got to stop doing this. Now, she had a job. She had a very good job. I think it was about the habit. It was just the habit. Some people they know you got it, they want it, and that's all that matters. And so one of my siblings does the same thing to her, Well, he knows she got it. And so he asks a certain amount of money from her every week, even though he has a full-time job, family, everything, but he wants it because he wants it. It's the habit. And so that had to come a time when I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore, because when I give it to her, it's a gift, but when I need it back, it's a loan to me. And so I had to make a decision. I prayed about it. I asked God to help me, and he gave me a strategy. And the strategy was essentially, I basically needed it back because I was going to school, and I needed it back because it was, part of my rent. She didn't like that. And that kind of contributed to the straining of our relationship. But I'm sorry, that's what it had to be. And so then you want to evaluate your childhood experiences with money and allowances. Consider the impact the first time you were exposed to the responsibility of money. So I didn't really take full responsibility of that check. Meaning that I didn't really learn about what was in my hands. I had the check. I cashed the check. I bought some clothes. I gave whatever I'm supposed to give under the expectation of the house to my mother. And then I spent what I spent. But I didn't understand financial responsibility. That's why many people are pushing, parents are pushing for coursework in financial responsibility, especially for those individuals, those students who can begin working at a certain age. And then determine if your relationship with money and personal finances reflects a secure attachment or an insecure attachment. So if you think about debt, one of the core values for Favor's financial recovery is ethical dealings. And so if you are still having trouble paying off your debt and choosing who you're going to pay and when you're going to pay them, even if you have the money, and sometimes even if you don't have the money, that reflects an insecure attachment with debt. If you run out of money every time you cash your check, that reflects an insecure attachment with debt. But if you not only pay your basic necessities and you manage to save some money or have some money saved, even if it was just up to $500 in the bank, just in case there was an emergency, that's you developing a secure attachment with your money. So that's how you overcome financial setback. You need to reassess your childhood experiences, evaluate those experiences, consider the impact of money and having responsibility for money, and then determine what type of relationship you have with your finances, because a lot of times we have a rebound relationship with our money. We have a rebound relationship with our finances, right? We use our finances to do whatever we want to do, and then we run out of it, and then we go and get money from other places, and it's a mess, right? So these are some of the keys I want you to think about. All right, hopefully you were able to gain some insight from this series topic. Like, subscribe, and visit. Like the video, hit the notification bell for future videos. You can visit my website, which is still in development, reginayfavors.com. You can always email me with a question, reginayfavors@yahoo.com. You will be able to purchase the book by the end of October 2021. I'm hoping that I will have it completely revised rather. It is already written and done. I just have to edit it. It is Overcoming Setback: 5 Keys for Entering and Exiting Correction. Thank you for visiting the channel. Coming soon is my new book that I am working on presently and hope to complete by the end of the year, December 2021, preferably February 2022, and that is Favor's Financial Recovery: Psychological Approaches to Overcoming Financial Setback, with some workbook elements. So it is it will be the book that will support the audio series, although I have developed the audio series prior to actually writing the book. So be on the lookout for this new book. When it comes out, when I finish, I will create an audio introduction to the book. Thank you again for visiting the channel.